The international community has called for restraint amongst all parties in Zimbabwe's election. Foreign observers are also pressuring the Electoral Commission to announce the results quickly and to address concerns about fraud by being transparent about the entire process.
Following disputed elections, the U.S. Embassy in Harare says it's deeply concerned. In a statement, it issued a warning to its citizens in the country to stay at home. Meanwhile, the United Nations is also calling on the political leaders and population in Zimbabwe to exercise restraint and reject any form of violence.
We'd like to remind the incumbents and political parties of the commitments they made in the Peace Pledge and the Code of Conduct to ensure a peaceful electoral process. We call on the political leaders and the population as a whole to exercise restraint and reject any form of violence while awaiting resolution of the disputes and announcement of the election results.
The Commonwealth Election Observer Mission in Zimbabwe also denounced the excessive use of force against unarmed civilians. The mission's chairperson, Ghana's former president John Mahama, urges Zimbabwe's Electoral Commission to expedite the announcement of full results, as further delay creates opportunity for speculation about possible manipulation.
The progress achieved so far could be undermined if all parties and their supporters do not demonstrate tolerance and respect for the rule of law. The electoral process is yet to conclude, and we are at a moment in Zimbabwean history that calls for the greatest maturity and leadership.
In the meantime, European Union observers say the election had several problems, including media bias, voter intimidation, and mistrust in the Electoral Commission.
Look, it should be important that there would be a traceability of the results. The longer it lasts to count, the more lack of credibility comes up, that something will be forged. Therefore, it's needed that it must be a traceability of the route down to the polling station level, where the party agents signed with all the others. So that's the proof that nothing happened between election day and counting of the elections.
The vote assessment by the EU, which is observing the results for the first time since 2002, is critical in determining whether Zimbabwe can shed its pariah status and return to the international fold, which could help trigger an economic revival. Without the stamp of approval of the international community, Zimbabwe's next leader will struggle to unlock the billions of dollars of international donor finance needed to get the shattered economy back on its feet.
We've connected back to Nigel, Zimbabwean journalist, who's given us updates on the election there. Now, Joe, the violence is being blamed on the opposition, but what has the MDC, especially Nelson Chamisa, said about the violence in the capital, which left at least 3 people dead?
Well, the statement by the MDC alliance, led by Nelson Chamisa, have been to the effect that they can't be held responsible for the violence that occurred yesterday, at least on 2 accounts. Number one, that these were the supporters and not necessarily card-carrying members. So as such, it would be very difficult to ascertain whether the ones that carried out acts of violence can be verified to be their members and part of their party. And secondly, they also argue that the military had no role and was heavily handed. However, I hasten to note that there is a high chance that there were opposition parties, supporters behind the violence, behind the protest, on the basis that they were happening in urban areas, which are predominantly MDC strongholds, and as such, it's highly likely that with ZANU-PF getting 2/3 majority in parliament, it's highly likely that there would be this reaction and so forth. But also suffice to say, indeed, the response by state security services, in the military in particular, was certainly uncalled for.
Now, Nigel, the president says he's talking to the opposition in the wake of Wednesday's violence, and he called for an independent investigation into the crisis. How soon can we expect the results of this investigation?
Well, what we know and what we've been made to understand is that President Mnangagwa has reached out to opposition leader Nelson Chamisa to have a dialogue around this crisis, this unfortunate incident of violence. And what we have also been made to understand is that the discussions will be centered around to ensure peace, for the opposition leader Nelson Chamisa to come out and denounce violence, but more importantly, accept the results. And that is something that was not probable. It's not likely going to happen, given the adamant nature that the opposition leaders have. One of their key leaders, Tendai Biti, has just had a press conference. Police have just issued a statement to the effect that they no longer want to arrest him. And in his press briefing, Tendai Biti virtually all but said they insist that Nelson Chamisa is the legitimate leader and should therefore be declared as president of the country. And the picture will only be clearer at 10 p.m. today, as the Zimbabwe Electoral Commission only a few minutes ago has held a press briefing to say that they will announce the results at 10 p.m. So what remains to be seen is, number one, those that were arrested by the police, because there were a number of people that participated in the protest yesterday that were arrested, some that are held up at the opposition party's headquarters in Harare, and some that continue to be called in by police for questioning, to see whether that investigation will lead us to anywhere. It will also be interesting to see whether the dialogue between President Mnangagwa and Nelson Chamisa, Advocate Nelson Chamisa, will yield any result. But more importantly, it will be interesting to see what result the Zimbabwe Electoral Commission is going to announce at 10 p.m. tonight, and what the reaction of both the incumbent, the ruling party, and those in opposition will be to those results.
Thank you so much, Nigel, a Zimbabwean journalist, for joining us. Still to come on the program, Algerian women take part in a shooting competition as their interest in hunting grows. Please stay with us.